Salutations, listeners. Sivalas Valeo.
Vala Magulis.
Nanu.
That one that worked pretty well that
Yeah,
time.
that was
We've been practicing.
That was nice. Yeah.
We rehearsed this.
Tuesdays and Thursdays are our rehearsal days. Thank you for tuning in. This is Three Men and a Basement, and we are the Ultra Crepidarians. My name is Colin McLeod.
Mark Culp here.
Action Jackson.
Xmas Jackson, Flaxen, Waxen. Woo! In this podcast, we review movies, and we like to deliver to you, the listener, an average schmuck's opinion about hidden gems in the wide world of cinema. In the show, we try and target movies that are not absolute blockbuster smashes. We also try and target ones that are not so obscure that you couldn't get your hands on a copy even if you wanted to. This is not Ark of the Covenant type movies. In either sense of the word.
Right.
Not a blockbuster like Raiders of the Lost Ark, but also not as obscure to find as the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, it's also not going to melt your face off if you happen to be a Nazi.
Some of them might.
Well, yeah.
Nazis have notoriously bad taste in cinema.
And soft flesh, from what I hear. Easy to punch.
Yeah. I mean, I came here to podcast and punch Nazis, and we're just about out of Nazis, so I guess we got a podcast.
Fine.
Yep. I had to contribute a little bit there.
Each one of my podcasters owes me 100 Nazi scalps. TM.
So,
Don't sue us. We aim for films that, in our experience, too few people have seen. Some that maybe people have only heard of, or ones that maybe you saw when the initial came out, but maybe they deserve another watch, or you're curious if they deserve another watch. We review them, and we like to deliver to you, the listener, our opinion about whether or not they're worth dusting off or tracking down and pop it in your your VHS player or
laser
media
disc?
device.
Yeah, your phonograph or your 8mm reel.
Your stone tablet.
I prefer 35mm personally.
Yeah.
Oh man, don't even get me started on 35mm. It's not as good as 36mm.
It's true. That extra millimeter does add quite a bit.
Changes everything.
Yeah.
I've always had the go big or go home, and I don't even touch anything below 37mm.
It's fair.
I find that kind of pretentious. I find, those are the types of people that are pounding away their novel on a typewriter at Starbucks at 2 in the afternoon.
I mean,
Have you been watching me?
Whoa.
Yeah, I thought you knew that.
Oh.
You were smiling at me like the
that
whole
was
time.
you!
That was me. That was me. I was in the bear
bonnet?
suit, but
that
was me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say bonnet, but bear suit.
Well, he had a bonnet too, but the bear suit was underneath the bonnet, obviously. It was layers of mystique.
Whoa. Okay. All right. So, what did we watch this week?
In this, the 15th episode of the series, we reviewed the movie True Story. This is a little bit more... This is on the more obscure side. I mean, big names, but...
I had never heard of this movie before tonight. And I was very excited because I always love watching and discovering new things, and I was very shocked.
Yeah, not only is it somewhat recent, I mean, this came out in, was that 2015, but like you were saying, the names are huge.
Yeah. So, all right, so we got True Story, came out in 2015, rated R, super deserves that R rating.
Yeah.
For subject matter.
Exactly, yeah. Nothing...
A little bit of the language, but pretty much, just the subject matter was what drives the rating.
Mm-hmm.
Do not watch this with the kids.
No.
So help me, do not watch this with the kids. We got a hour and 40-minute runtime on this movie. Yeah.
Perfect.
It was solid.
Yeah.
I felt like the movie climaxed when it should have. Like this was good. It was actually kind of refreshing to watch like a shorter movie that still felt fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it didn't run it at a huge clip, but it also didn't drag on. It felt very natural, progressed the way I figured it should, but also I wasn't counting down the minutes and checking the runtime. It was pretty impressive.
Which kind of suggests to me, and I don't know this for a fact, we have not looked into this. As you could probably guess, True Story, the movie, is based on a true story. And it kind of suggests to me that it didn't drag, but it also... Like, it wasn't a super long movie. It wasn't crazy grandiose. Like, suggests that it may be kind of closer to the truth than your average true story movie. I mean, that's just like a gut feeling I have. I don't have anything to back that up. But IMDb has this as a crime, drama, mystery, thriller.
Yes.
All of those, yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah. Is there anything that's missing?
No, I don't think so, because it's not an action. You know, I mean, I think that
Certainly not a comedy.
we could talk about each of those genres and how they relate to this movie specifically. So I'm happy with
I
that.
think the only tag that might be missing is suspense, but that might be a little misleading.
Yeah.
I think that could be covered though under mystery and thriller.
It's true.
But you know, you're right. You're right. There is definitely some tension in places that you would not expect it.
I also feel like, kind of like in Kung Fu Hustle, where we're like, yeah, I feel like it deserves a Kung Fu tag because some people classify that as a type of movie. This might also do well with like a true story or true crime tag applied to it. So IMDb has the description of this movie as, when disgraced New York Times reporter Michael Finkel meets accused killer Christian Longo, who has taken on Finkel's identity, his investigation morphs into a game of cat and mouse. I don't know if I'm in love with that description.
Yeah, the phrase cat and mouse suggests, I don't know, sort of a catch me if you can, or I see a chase scene in my head, and that's not really how this plays out.
Yeah, and it also sort of suggests that they're like at odds with one another.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know about that description. I feel like this movie is one that you should probably watch without that description.
Yeah.
The only thing I mean, how would you amend it? Like, I think the first part is accurate. You know, New York Times reporter, this dude accused of killing his family assumes his identity, and he meets him and interviews him.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably all you want to know about the movie going in.
We got to get into spoilers, I think, before we can like kind of
elaborate.
Yeah.
So, who else we got in this movie?
We've got James Hill and Jonah Franco.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, these were, I think, the big names that I was referring to. But seriously, James Franco and Jonah Hill playing roles that I know I've never seen them play.
This is a very serious movie.
Very serious.
And neither of them do you see in this type of role very frequently.
Yeah, there's no humor really being presented by those two characters. I mentioned it with Reign Over Me and Adam Sandler, but I really enjoy watching a traditional kind of comedian, or what you would expect to be a traditional comedian, jump into heavy roles. I'd lap that up.
So we got James Franco as Christian Longo, who's the man accused of killing his family. Jonah Hill as Mike Finkel, who's this New York Times reporter. We also have Ethan Suplee in this movie, so if you're familiar with Frankie the Enforcer in Boy Meets World, he was also in My Name is Earl.
He was Seth Ryan in American History X.
Yeah, that was where I was going next. That was holy shit, that movie.
Possibly his biggest known role, though, from Evolution.
Oh, so good. I knew we covered him in something we did. I just couldn't think of it.
We also had Felicity Jones, who I was very impressed with, and I enjoyed watching her arc through this.
Yeah, we also got William Jackson Harper in a very bit part. I would not have been able to give you his name, but if any of you watch The Good Place, he plays Chidi, the co-star, along with Kristen Bell in that show.
I love that show.
That is a great show.
It's a great show.
And this is very clearly like early in his
repertoire.
Yeah, for sure. But he is such a good actor, and he cracks me up in that show. So shout out to him. And hey, if you want to write us and tell us that you love the show too, that's fine. Like, you can do that.
That works for me.
Yeah. Burp envelope, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so would we recommend this movie is the question.
Ooh.
Like 3 deep breaths. Oh boy. Settle up.
I think with some caveats, you know, this is not a feel-good movie. This is a movie that you watch once and you absorb. I think it's going to go over some people's heads. But if the criteria is would we recommend it to ourselves before we watched it? 100%. I really felt like I got something out of this.
I agree. I feel like this movie comes with a Surgeon General's warning.
That's a great way to put it.
If you're going to take it in, you have to be prepared for what comes next. But you're right. If someone on the street or one of my friends had told me, hey, you really need to see this movie, and I will tell you it is a movie that is going to make you think, I would sign up immediately.
Completely agree. I would recommend this movie to myself, but I would be very discriminating about who I would recommend it to, just like in the general public. It is very heavy, content matter is pretty substantial.
Hard to watch.
And it doesn't, like, it just sort of, like, compounds with the idea and the notion and the knowledge, rather, that it's a true story. So, you know, full warning, but if you're the kind of person who likes true crime stories, if you're the kind of person who likes sort of unusual true events, it might be worth a watch. Or if you just want to see James Franco and Jonah Hill in sort of an unusual role for them, like, I think they both, like,
nailed it.
Yeah, they really, like, got outside their comfort zone, and I think they did it well.
Yeah.
With the caveat, too, with the Jonah Hill, James Franco thing, like, if you love Jonah Hill, James Franco movies traditionally, know that this is unique, and you may not like it if that is the kind of movie that you're after. You know, I think if you want to watch an actor stretch their legs and kind of see the full range of their ability, 100% all over it. But, if you love Pineapple Express, you've come to the wrong place.
And I would agree with you on the Jonah Hill side of things. You know, he's done a lot of comedic roles. He's done a couple of good serious roles too, but James Franco has this huge range of going straight from stoner movies to doing films like this. He's had TV shows where he played serious roles, and he's proven that he does it really well.
He was in 127 Hours.
Yeah,
and Freaks and Geeks.
Yep. And so he's got the chops, and everybody knows it. Jonah Hill is sort of an outlier in that, where we've probably seen him in some serious roles, but obviously he's more comfortable on the comedic side.
What I thought was interesting, too, is in this movie, you can feel the chemistry between the two of them, but again, not in the way that you would expect. I think, again, if you say this is Jonah Hill and James Franco, the assumption is that it's a comedy because it's those two, even though they do have serious roles from time to time. Their combination it's really good in this.
So that's 3 Recs all around?
Yep.
So are we ready to... Spoilers! I don't know exactly what Mark did, but...
I'm trying a new thing.
Yeah, you're really trying a new thing.
It almost sounded like a sonar spoiler.
Ooh, I'm gonna save that for next week. Yeah, you better wait for that. But yeah, so we were talking about heavy subject matter. We're talking about child murder here, and you see there are visual components to that subject matter in a way that like a Citizen X was pretty graceful about dodging around. It didn't spare you the imagery.
Wow, you just took like an aggressive left turn from the boys.
I'm sorry, child murder? Gosh.
Yeah, that was...
That's right out the gate. But that's how the movie starts.
It does.
They're right like that.
No punches pulled.
Oh.
So I guess we just got to jump right into it, and we gotta like basically talk about this first scene, because so one of the things I do pretty frequently in my day-to-day life, I find is like a healthy and enjoyable mental exercise, is to ask questions like, what would you rather? What are your top 5? Blah, blah, blah. And one of the ones that I really like to ask is like top 5 saddest scenes in any movie. And this movie, I had seen it before. I was the only one of the 3 that had seen it, but for some reason, that scene never made it to my list. I don't know if I just forgot that it existed, but it is truly like challenging to watch.
Haunting.
Yeah, it is. So basically the movie opens, the first scene is...
It's a teddy bear.
It is a close-up of teddy bear fur. You don't know what it is initially, and it starts to come into focus as the teddy bear basically falls away from the camera, and you realize that the camera is up above, sort of suspended, 6-7 feet off the ground, aimed down at the ground. And as the teddy bear falls, it starts to take up less and less of the frame, and other things start becoming apparent, and it's basically falling onto a 2-year-old child who is curled up inside a suitcase and falls down on top of her, and then the suitcase gets zipped up and then tossed in a bay. It is an incredibly challenging scene to watch.
Your heart just plummets immediately, because entering into this movie without any knowledge, I purposefully avoided any synopses or trailers because I wanted to experience the full immersion of this movie. And sorry, poor word choice. And the second we kind of got a glimpse of what was happening, all of a sudden, my blood pressure dropped and I was cold for a second because I realized we are watching the death of a toddler. It's just brutal. And then from that scene, we
cut to Africa.
Yeah.
And
just as abruptly as we enter, we leave.
Basically, it's a pretty dramatic change of scene. We find ourselves in a hut in Africa with Jonah Hill, who is interviewing some youths, or Utes, as they would say in My Cousin Vinny. And he's using a translator and is clearly asking these youths about some abuse that they have undergone. And he's trying to get information from them. They're clearly like scared and uncomfortable. And there is this very like ambiguous part of the scene where like even somebody who's not a reporter hasn't undergone like a ethics and journalism class. I think everybody can kind of pick up that this is not strictly ethical. Like, he pulls out a $10 bill from his wallet and he's like, you see this? Like, you can have this as long as I get an answer to my question. Mm-hmm. And like, paying for information, even your like average schmo in the street knows that's a pretty fucking big no-no. Because what are people going to do when you're handing them money for information? They're going to give you information whether it's fucking true or not. Yeah. Like, they're not telling their story because they want it told. They're telling a story because you paid them to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lack of journalistic integrity.
Yep. And you don't fully grasp what's really going on in that scene. You just kind of get that kind of off-put feeling. You know, it establishes Jonah Hill as someone who takes himself very seriously despite his, unethical behavior. I mean, you can just kind of tell in the way he presents himself there. Yeah. Where do we go from there?
So from there, it cuts back to New York. And Jonah Hill is basically back in New York. You learn at the end of the last scene that he is a reporter for the New York Times. And he's back in New York. He is back at the Times. And he's sort of finishing up this story. And the next day it runs. It grabs the headline of New York Times, like, big deal, big story.
Yeah, he made the cover of the New York Times Magazine, which is huge.
Huge. And, I mean, this is like he said the 10th time it gets dropped in conversations, like the 10th time he's done it. And he's clearly a hotshot columnist for the New York Times. And he ends up getting called in like the next day, and his bosses want to talk to him, and he thinks he's going to get a Pulitzer or be up for a Pulitzer. And what actually ends up happening is they're asking him about some of the questions that have come up related to the article. They want to know, like, people are saying, like, the person he said was in the picture is not the person in the picture. This other person is. And he also interviewed that person, but it comes to light pretty quickly that what ended up happening was he interviewed a whole bunch of kids surrounding this story, and he sort of rolled all of their stories into a single one because he thought it would be more impactful. And he lied. Basically, he lied about what transpired, what happened to who, and a combination of like the PR damage done to the New York Times, the need for a retraction to the story, and kind of the credibility damage that he's done to the charities that work with these kids, trying to get them off of like abusive cocoa plantations and stuff like that. He ends up getting fired. And he kind of loses his way a little bit. Like, he really, like, his job was clearly his identity.
Yeah, there's a scene, well, it's that scene where he's pleading with them about how they are to proceed. Like, he's asking, well, I can leave right now and I can write up a retraction. Just don't print an apology. If you do this, no one's going to touch me. And he's pleading with them. He says, please. And obviously they have to protect their own reputation, and he ends up getting canned. There's a little slice scene that's thrown in, I think possibly even between the first and the scene we were just talking about, where we get just a brief introduction to James Franco's character, and he uses the name Michael Finkel. And that scene is stacked right up against a scene where Jonah Hill's character references himself and even pulls out his identification. So you know that both men are going by Michael Finkel, but one of them clearly is.
Yeah, basically, it cuts to a church in Mexico, and James Franco is in this church, meets this young German woman, and has carnal relations with her. I did not have sex with that German woman.
But he did, though.
But he definitely did.
He definitely did.
And
not
that's
just
not
a
great.
blowjob under the desk. It was...
Coitus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, James Franco, his character's arrested.
We need a little levity, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a really heavy subject matter.
It is it's pretty dark.
But so James Franco's character's arrested. We don't see that happen, but it's alluded to. You see the cops show up, and there's a brief montage of Jonah Hill's character making several phone calls. He's trying to get work, but again, no one's touching him. Every conversation that he has leads back to this African story. So you really get the idea that he is down on his luck, and there's really nothing that he can do to stay in his field.
Nobody trusts him anymore.
Yeah.
Like his credibility is gone, so his ability to sell himself as a journalist who does honest work has evaporated, and he ends up getting this call sort of in the midst of this emotional and existential turmoil from a reporter asking him about this guy, and he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, who is this guy? And he's like, and why are you talking to me? And the guy said, well, didn't you know any of this? Like, he said he was you. He was pretending to be you. Mm-hmm. And Jonah Hill Googles it, finds out that, oh yeah, here's this guy who's accused of murdering his whole family, wife and 3 kids. And he was basically using my identity while in Mexico on the lam. Which, how fucked up would that be?
That's, yeah, I remember getting hit by that because not only did he commit these atrocities, but the very next day he went and took off and took on somebody else's name, was presumably having a good time in Mexico. Obviously, he was having a good time with some German woman, and very casually and comfortably using somebody else's identity. Mm-hmm. And then you find out, as a person, not only did this person kill his entire family, but then took your name and fled the law.
When you said I got hit by that, I definitely thought you were going to talk about a time that you were a victim of identity theft.
Oh, I mean, just my bank accounts, but there's nothing in those, so...
It's true.
Yeah.
It's like somebody stealing an empty cup from you.
Yep.
It's like, great, you got a cup.
Yeah, you can have it.
There was no scotch in that. There better not have been scotch in that.
Not anymore. I drank the scotch.
Ah. Yeah, people walking around saying, yo, I'm Xmas Jackson Flaxen Waxen.
That's some necessary levity.
Yeah, we're going to try to inject that as much as...
Just pepper it in.
Fucking shot of cortisol to the knee. Like, we're going to try to inject as much... pain-relieving levity as possible.
Might need some scotch.
So you can tell that...
for internal wounds.
Right.
Bandages are for external wounds. Scotch is for internal wounds.
You can tell that Jonah Hill's character is intrigued, and I think he even mentions that he's, somewhat flattered that this guy would use his name. And I think that's, the first kind of, foreshadow into Jonah Hill's kind of mental state. Because you find that there's a striking number of similarities between these two people.
They're both a bit narcissistic.
Yeah, very much. Very much. But it manifests in very different ways.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that the filmmakers or the story writers, whatever, may have been doing with that is sort of identifying how, certain traits, like you said, can manifest in really different ways. And the people who have the traits that can lead to murdering your entire family can also lead you to, say, be a really exceptional journalist or the CEO of a company. It's like you hear CEOs have disproportionately high levels of sociopathy and psychopathy, and their minds work very different from your average schmo, and they end up finding themselves in these roles pretty frequently. But those types of traits can also lead to fucking hunting humans for sport, and
I find that fascinating.
Terrifying, I think, is maybe the word that most people would use, but yes, fascinating as well.
I would disagree. I think that most people find it intriguing. I think...
No, that's true. That's true.
There are so many books and movies written about some of the most heinous criminals in our history. The Jeffrey Dahmers, the John Wayne Gacy's, people are fascinated by...
aberrants.
Yeah.
People fucking love aberrants. Anytime you see somebody doing something that you're just I cannot even begin to put myself in your shoes.
You have to read it to understand. I think that's part of the craving, is you want to understand what made this person do this thing.
Yeah, and it's just it's 99% of the time, it's wholly unsatisfying.
Yep.
Not unsatisfying, I shouldn't say that, but it's you're trying to find an answer that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And it's like an itch, and you cannot scratch it no matter how much, like, fucked up things you read that people have done. You're just like, this is not satisfying me in like a solution sense, because it's just...
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, well, it is your opinion, and so there's no room for me to agree or disagree. But and hopefully I'm not outing myself here, but when I watch these types of movies, I'm intrigued, and there's like a certain like allure to it. Like you go about your life, and this fantasy that you could be, predator's the wrong word, but like these people seem to exist on a different plane, and they
in a liminal space.
Yeah, they can manipulate and they can control, and they are always in control, even when they're behind bars. It's very seductive, I think, to some people.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the attraction maybe varies by person, but I feel like the majority of people are attracted strictly due to the aberrance. It's the same thing that attracts people to the circus. It's like to see some crazy shit that you didn't think, existed in the world, or that a human being was capable of. Like, you do the same thing when you read that shit. You're like, oh my god, how could a human being perpetrate this type of carnage?
I think some people are looking for reflections of themselves in it too. Like, not necessarily in the heinous atrocities that they've committed, but in a, wow, I can relate with this, and I can relate with that, and that I find attractive. And then their mind starts wondering, well, if I'm having these weird connections and these weird kind of self-reflections, does that mean that I too am capable of these atrocities? And
I think that's part of what you're looking for, is like, mm-hmm. You're looking for, what is the thing that separates me from this person? Mm-hmm. Why does Jeffrey Dahmer and Albert Fish and Ed Gein and all those fucked up dudes,
Ted Bundy,
why do they do that and I don't do that? And it's a little like, seeing blood. Like, people have a tendency to have a visceral reaction to blood, and like one of the strong arguments for why that is it's this like aggressive reflection of your own mortality. You are a bag of goo, and if the bag gets broken, you're in danger. And that's like something we don't like to think about. Our brain really likes to avoid that topic. And
Thank you for bringing it up, by the way. Now it's all I can think about.
I know, right? And when you're a goo envelope, and when you see stuff like that, when you see carnage, you're forced to reconcile those things. And it's sort of similar with like people committing heinous crimes. Is like, you want to know what makes them not you, and you not them. But oftentimes the line is not really like stark or distinct. And you can't point to something and say, well, that person has a mole on their cheek, and obviously everybody who's got a mole on their cheek is the one who's committed heinous crimes. Boom, case closed. I don't have a mole. I'm not at risk of this. But it's not that clear cut. It's this really weird, blurry area, and it scares people, and it forces them into this situation where they have to reflect and think like, not only am I not that different from the person who did this terrible stuff, but there are a lot of people around me all the time who are also not that different from the people who have committed this stuff. And like, it only takes one. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling that you find yourself in when you try to process this type of shit. But I think like a lot of the allure, a lot of the drive is to be like, what is it? What is the thing that makes them and me? And how can I just look at the line to know that I'm not on the other side of it?
Mm-hmm. By the way, I'm going to rewind a little bit and say Goo Envelope is a great new band name, and I call it.
All right, then I will be Bag of Goo.
All right.
I like it.
All right, also, like, let's just say, if there is not a pornographic film out there
called Goo Envelope,
called Bag of Goo,
I don't want to watch that one.
Like,
I'll pass that one.
I'm not going to say I'm going to hunt it down. But if somebody was like, oh yeah, no, my dad's got a whole bunch of smut films in the back, and one of them's called Bag of Good, be like, yeah, no, I know.
Starring
I
Brandy
figured.
Max.
Starring who?
Brandy Max.
Oh, yes. Star of such adult fare as
Bag of Goo.
Bag of Goo.
And moist cardboard.
And Too Big to Nail.
All right.
Okay, so we're getting back on the gravy train here. Gravy train is super not the right term, but
no, but it fits.
just trying to fucking get us back on track. Yeah.
It's such a heavy subject matter.
It is. Like, I'm really enjoying these little, like, diversions into not fucked up land.
Yeah. So, long and short, Jonah Hill ends up tracking down James Franco and ends up actually meeting with him. And it is kind of through their meeting that Jonah Hill decides that he is going to attempt to write a book about James Franco's story. Partly because he finds it intriguing because of all the connections and similarities he finds with James Franco, but I mean also very much because he doesn't have very many options if he wants to try to stay in his field.
Yeah, I mean, he's literally has said to his girlfriend through this film, he's like, this is my only chance, and second chance is just look. This literally fell into my lap. Like, this is my only chance to getting back in the game. Like, the guy is, like we said, his identity is as a writer. To be completely shunned by the professional writing community, it has got to be devastating.
There is a scene before he ends up getting the call that Christian Longo is taking his identity, where he's calling pretty much every contact in his little black book, and every single one of them shoots him down.
Christian Longo, that is the murderer. So
James Franco played him.
Yes.
Is that what you're looking for?
yeah.
Yeah, when Christian Longo takes over the identity of Mike Finkel, right before we find that out, he's calling all of these news outlets, reporters, media superstars, magazines, and every single one of them says, "Look, you screwed up too big. We're not gonna take you on." And you get a very clear picture that he's been shut down. He's been blacklisted from the journalism game.
I mean, he even jumped right into, like, black and white and started singing, take me on, take on me. And they're all like, no. And it was like...
It was beautiful.
Honestly, their lyrical response did not fit into the song he was singing. It was really awful. It clashed, but they did it, and he was... Mark is judging the shit out of
Oh my god! I mean, I understand we're doing everything that we can to try to avert from this topic,
but we gotta talk about it.
Yeah, I think the meat and potatoes of this film is pretty straightforward and can kind of be, I don't know, breezed over, but like there's a pretty substantial middle part of this film where Jonah Hill and James Franco's characters are basically getting to know each other. There's definitely a friendship blossoming, and he's collecting information from his book. James Franco has agreed to give him pieces of the story as long as Jonah Hill agrees that he won't publish until after the trial, and that...
He gives him, like, writing tips.
There was one other thing that he had to agree to.
I thought it was the two. I thought it was the...
It was like a tit for tat. It wasn't a tit for tat. Jonah Hill was going to supply writing tips. James Franco was going to supply the truth.
Jonah Hill.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Yes,
think...
that's the tit is the writing tips and the don't publish till after the trial. Right. My bad. Okay, so the tit for tat. I would prefer 2 tits to every tat.
I have a tat. I don't have 2 tits.
You have 1?
Yeah.
Whoa.
It's right in the middle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Should have listened to that one boob chick.
That's a Morton's
Kung Pao is also on our list, by the way.
Tit.
I can't wait for that.
Morton's tit.
Yeah.
This is never going to end, this Morton's Morton's
not.
toe.
I hope not.
My grandma lived in a town called Morton.
Yeah.
I think everybody had Morton toes out there.
all the Garlingtons going back generations.
All the good ones, anyway.
Yeah.
So again, if we're kind of summarizing a few scenes here, really Jonah Hill is almost taking a shine to him. He's comparing the notes that James Franco has written for him to like notes that he has taken himself. And he's like just shocked. I mean, even the doodles on the sides of the pages are similar. So he's drawing connections. Like he needs that for some reason, and it kind of, I think, obscures some of his skill sets.
Some of his judgment.
Yeah, very much so. And so, like, at the midway point of this movie, you can tell that Jonah Hill, and I know for me personally, as I was watching it, I started questioning, was James Franco guilty of what they said? And that morphed into, was he guilty of some of it? What is the bigger story? And like, you really start believing that you're seeing the humanity in James Franco.
Which is a brilliant piece of filmmaking, because that's exactly what Jonah Hill's character was going through. Is like, he started to question, he started to be unsure about these things, and James Franco's character, Christian Longo, had entered in a not guilty plea on all counts. And it wasn't until after a pretty substantial spell where they were exchanging information and Jonah Hill's character was starting to write this book that the preliminary hearing happened, and James Franco's character, Christian Longo, he entered in a plea of not guilty for his 2 older kids and a plea of guilty for his wife and youngest kid, who you later learn was the one in the suitcase. And as you can imagine, that is incredibly confusing.
And incredibly damaging to Jonah Hill's character, because not only is he basing everything on this book, now his entire book is predicated on a lie.
Yeah, and he had to basically learn about this in the preliminary hearing.
After he was already told that he was getting a $250,000 advance on the book.
Right.
So not only, the book that he's writing, but he is further damaging his career potentially by not being as thorough as he's expected to be.
Yeah. So
that preliminary trial, though, I just want to jump in there for a minute. Like, some of the verbiage that James Franco was using during his deposition were phrases that he had pulled from his conversation with Jonah Hill's character several scenes prior.
Wait, not in the preliminary trial. In the preliminary trial, he didn't actually take the stand. He was just entering in the pleas, the guilty and not guilty pleas.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And so he was just like, not guilty, and the judge is like, you realize this is kind of fucked up, and like, the odds that you just did all of them or none of them is way better than the odds that you did some of them. Mm-hmm. So like, this is going to confuse the shit out of the jury, and like, the odds that you're entering in these pleas to intentionally try and confuse the jury are pretty high, and that's not great.
And the camera like zooms in on his face, and like, James Franco does a fantastic job with this piece of work. You can just like see in his eyes that he is completely comprehending what he is doing. Very, very, calculated. I understand. And that, for me, was one of the first signs that maybe Franco believes himself to be the smartest one in the room.
I felt like there was still a little doubt for me at that point.
There was some doubt, but that was the first nugget for me.
Yeah.
See, I had an inkling that we weren't getting the full story right from the moment that he made Mike Finkel agree not to publish anything until after the trial. Because at that point, we know, A, that Mike is writing the book as he goes. B, we know that he's not admitting to anything. And C, we know that he clearly did something, otherwise he wouldn't be in jail. So we don't know if he committed all of the murders, or none of the murders, or half the murders, or one of the murders, but we know he did some of it. And so by forcing him to agree not to publish until after the trial, we know he's withholding something juicy that's going to essentially be the big reveal.
Yeah, and that is definitely confirmed in an exchange that Jonah Hill has with the lead prosecutor, or one of the lead prosecutors, who basically says to him, like, listen, we want all of your information, all your correspondence, everything that you have on this guy, so we can pore over it and see if it'll help us in the trial. And Jonah Hill basically denies him. And in that exchange, the prosecutor says basically just that there's a calmness and a smugness about Longo that is unsettling, and it means that he feels like he has another card to play. Mm-hmm. And you kind of get to see that card as the trial unfolds. Basically, the trial opens up with the prosecution's case, which is truly horrible to watch, because they do use photos of the children and of the wife in the suitcases and shit. It's definitely, if you're watching this movie and you're sensitive to that kind of shit, like, when the prosecution is presenting their case, like, maybe fast forward that scene. It's challenging to watch. And then after that, it gets to the defense's portion, the next day, and Longo takes the stand and basically sings this story about how he told his wife that basically they were in deep financial trouble. They were massively in debt on credit cards, check fraud, all this stuff. And the next day he went to work, came home, and his wife, according to him, had killed all the kids. And he ended up killing her in a fit of rage. And then he realized that the younger one wasn't dead, so he killed her himself, which was... Honestly, that was actually maybe the hardest part of the movie to listen to. That and the opening sequence were very challenging. And then he put his wife and youngest daughter in a suitcase and tossed them in the bay. And that was his story, and that was basically that was what he was sitting on. And that's why he entered this confusing plea, saying, I'm guilty of 2, but I'm not guilty of the other 2, basically as a way to basically say the initial 2 killings weren't him, and the 2 killings that were him, one was in rage, that was his wife, and one was in mercy because he discovered his daughter, basically dead, but not all the way dead, and so he just, finished it.
So fucked up.
Incredibly fucked up. So it was in that him taking the stand that he used definitely 2, perhaps 3 different...
Just bits of verbiage.
Yeah, yeah.
And you could tell that...
Turns of phrase.
Yeah, as he was
metaphors.
saying him, it was a story to him. It was rehearsed. It was... they came out of his mouth as if that's where they originated. You could tell that he was weaving something.
And as you can imagine, Jonah Hill just flipped his shit. He got to the bathroom and he just I thought he was going to puke, but he just ended up punching the stall because basically what happened was this person who was not eloquent, this person who did not have a mastery of words, manipulated Jonah Hill, a professional writer, investigator, to basically help him cultivate powerful turns of phrases that he could weave into his narrative to convince a jury that he was not guilty of shit that he was definitely guilty of. So basically, a person sticks their hand up your ass and works you like a puppet and tries to get you to help them get off with murder. It's terrible. And if somebody had manipulated me in that way, I cannot tell you how fucking violated I would feel. I would feel...
Dirty.
Filthy. Just...
Mm-hmm. It's such a powerful performance, I think, because you really feel that reaction from him. He then kind of proceeds to contact that investigator again to the prosecutioner. Yeah, the prosecutioner. So,
he does wear a black hood, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's a little weird with the eye holes and it's burlap, which is weird.
And, instead of a shotgun mounted on the back of his vehicle, it was a battle axe, which was kind of interesting.
Some of that isn't true.
It's true.
It's a true story, you might say.
All of that is untrue, which is true. It's a true story.
It's a true story. Yeah, so he basically goes to this guy and he says, "Here's all of my notes. Maybe,
I done fucked up.
Yeah, maybe you can pour over. Maybe there's time." And the guy just looks at him and just
too little, too late, man.
Yeah, you missed the gravy train, man. What happens now is going to happen, and hopefully the jury can see through him in a way that you couldn't.
Yeah, this matter is beyond all the other matters in the same way that a Morton's toe is beyond all of the other toes.
Yes.
One might say. That's what people say, right?
Yeah.
They're oh yeah, no, this can't be helped. This is a Morton's toe. This is...
God damn it. It's so heavy.
It is really heavy. I need to keep doing it. I need to keep just fucking getting myself in an okay headspace because this movie is fucking dark.
Yes. It's not okay, yeah. There's a quick scene too that I think it happens before some of this, so I'm just gonna kind of throw it in there. His wife or girlfriend is having...
Jonah Hill, Mike Finkel, his girlfriend.
Yeah. Sorry. She's kind of watching Jonah Hill digest this information and go through it throughout the course of the movie, and you can tell that she's very troubled by it. She's capable of seeing through what James Franco is doing in a way that Jonah Hill isn't. There's a powerful scene where both Jonah Hill and his girlfriend are on their various keyboards. One of them happens to be the keyboard of a laptop, and the other is a piano. And so you really get the idea that these two kind of complement each other in a way. And that kind of, I think, is some foreshadowing for later in the movie where she's able to put it together. But anyway, there's a scene where James Franco calls the house of Jonah Hill, and his girlfriend answers the phone. And at first, the story is that, oh, can you just leave him a message? But very quickly, as the viewer, you realize that this was not the intention of that phone call. James Franco starts flattering her, is very quick with his words. It's not a conversation, and it's not a monologue, but James
it's like
Franco...
a combination, like evaluation and like
manipulation.
Yeah, he is both trying to size her up and also get her to do anything that he can get her to do.
Yeah, he is very obviously steering the conversation in a direction that he needs it to go, and the manipulation is so palpable there. Initially, when I saw the scene, I was concerned. Well, that was another one of the red flags for his character, because at that point you don't know the degree to which he is guilty. But that's a very unsettling scene.
Made me want to call my wife. It felt like my skin was crawling. Just the temperature
that's
of the
that's
scene.
the crabs.
Oh, that's what that is?
Yeah.
Now I definitely have to call my wife.
Sorry about that, by the way.
God damn it.
It happens. It happens. Man, that's why I don't eat seafood.
Yeah, just a good old-fashioned Maryland crab boil.
Yeah. But this scene...
Fuck. I'm sorry. I just have to keep bringing us up.
I know.
I keep, we're in a hot air balloon, and I just keep ripping that cord. Like, go up, go up. Talk about something that's not this.
Yeah.
But the temperature of that scene, the attitude, Felicity Jones' character is clearly feeling how we are. And at one point, I should mention, Mike Finkel's office, where he does all of his writing, is just peppered with correspondence from Christian Longo, and it's very much like that scene in A Beautiful Mind where everything's plastered all over the walls and you're sort of building a narrative. He's nailing the letters and drawings from Christian Longo to the walls of his office, to the point where his entire office is decorated in yellow legal pads. And Felicity, her character, Jill, keeps looking at it offhand, just sort of uncomfortable. And at one point during the phone call with Christian Longo, she just shuts the doors to the office. And I think it was a symbolic, I'm trying to shut him out and keep him out of my head, which I felt that as the viewer. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I did not think about it that way during the movie, but yeah, it does feel like his office is sort of taking on the appearance and the vibe of the mind of that man. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it really was, now that you mention it, it really was sort of a symbolic, like, okay, I'm definitely closing the fucking door to that part of the house, because that part of the house is the brain of a fucking killer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's no good.
She peeks into the room every once in a while, and you can just tell that she feels dirty being in that room.
It's also pretty fucking haunting, because it's like, it's not only yellow, which is like, it's a pretty unsettling color. Like, I mean, just like that kind of like, maybe not yellow, but a dingy kind of like cream yellow. That's an unsettling color. And it's like basically the whole room has become that. And he's got these really fucking like demented drawings and shit and just horrible stuff. Not to mention that they all came from a fucking killer. Like, and not just like any killer. Like, it takes a special kind of fucked up to kill your family.
To drown a 2-year-old in a suitcase.
Yeah.
Yeah. That takes a special...
And, like, cold blood. Like, it really isn't even, like, a crime of passion.
Should I go to Starbucks or should I kill my children?
Yeah, it was, like, yeah, really demented. Anyway, so, yada, yada, yada. That's our way of saying a whole bunch of other shit that we don't have time to talk about happens. And it ends up in the verdict scene. He gets a guilty verdict on all counts and gets recommended for the death penalty. And then it cuts to a scene where Jonah Hill decides he needs to, like, get some resolution from all of this, like, mind fuckery.
Close this chapter on the book.
Yeah, and he goes and visits this guy in prison, and Franco, he's basically acting like they're old buddies again, like what he did was not completely, like, batshit, and, like, using Jonah Hill's words in order to get off for a fucking, like, capital murder charge. he's talking about it, and he's basically saying, like, oh, I got a new appeals lawyer. He's going to help me, appeal, blah, blah, blah. I think we're going to go with, like, this defense. And basically, I'm going to change my fucking story and lie. I'm ready to tell the truth. And Jonah Hill, kind of in, like, a neat gesture, sort of manipulates him back and is like, no, we can't do that because, such and such. Basically, the story that Franco is spinning is, oh, the truth is I came home and she was smothering the toddler, and I just went crazy, and I don't remember any of it, and I must have killed all of them, including the other kids, and then I woke up at the airport, and I have no idea what happened. And Jonah Hill's character is basically like, no, that wouldn't work, because why would she wait the whole day to kill the toddler? Why would she wait right until you're coming home? Like, doesn't add up, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you could go with this story, and he sort of, like, made up a story. Could that work?
And Franco falls for it for a second.
He does. He's like, yeah, I don't know, maybe that could work. And then Jonah Hill just, like, fucking punches the glass, and he's like, no, it won't work because it's a fucking lie, because you're not telling the truth. And it was solid. Like, it was nice to see the manipulator get manipulated.
But the scene is immediately twisted. So Jonah Hill, like, he nuts up and he, like, confronts him, but then Franco kind of sits back and, like, just kind of reminds him, how are the sales on the book? You need me.
He knows why he's there.
Yeah.
He's there because he needs to finish the book.
Yeah, I'll open my mouth. One day I'll open my mouth and you'll be there. Mm-hmm. So you can tell that it's kind of in vain. He has Jonah Hill by the balls.
Yeah, he's reminding him of the power dynamic, which is a hallmark of master manipulators. Like, it's demented. So after that,
I think at that point then it goes to the book signing.
Yes, and there's one final scene with the book signing where...
and let me just say,
yeah, go for it.
Up to that point, I was really hoping that Jonah Hill would have a redemption moment where he would flip the tables on Franco and say, I didn't write the book. No one's going to ever remember you. And that's what I was hoping for. And that didn't happen. He still wrote the book. But he didn't tell a story that was trying to, like, glamorize what took place. The book ended up being about the relationship that he had with Franco.
And the manipulation that took place.
Yeah.
And basically how he was used. From the little excerpt that he read, and if this movie is actually, like, based on that book exclusively, it's definitely very unbecoming from the perspective of Jonah Hill's character, and it's like a very humbling type thing, because he basically says, not only did I actually intentionally, like, lie about that shit in that story that I got fired for, which is not very becoming, but also, like, I immediately got taken in by another story where I was taken advantage of, and my source was actually working me as opposed to the other way around, which was pretty interesting.
And he mentions at the beginning of the book signing, in the excerpt that he was reading, that he hated Longo. He hated him. He said it 3 or 4 times, because clearly he was grasping at straws to try to save his career, and that plays into the narcissism a little bit, because he was doing anything and everything he could to save his name, which is kind of funny because his name meant nothing at the time that it was stolen from him. So a lot of it was just interesting to see that he was writing this book not only because he was intrigued, but because he needed it more than anything. And at the end of this movie, in that scene where they're talking through the prison glass, it's very evident that this book could mean nothing if Longo talked. So,
which he ultimately did. So after the book signing scene, is there any other on the book signing scene?
Well, a bit where somebody stands up in the back of the room, and it's James Franco. It's not. It is the actor James Franco, and he's clearly like a vision. I wasn't sure if maybe the question that was asked of Jonah Hill was a question being posed by a real member of the crowd, or if it was entirely in Jonah Hill's head. But Jonah Hill saw James Franco's character kind of asking him some deep questions, and kind of like punctuates it with James Franco's behind bars. He lost his freedom. What did you lose?
Yeah. What was taken from you in this exchange?
Yeah.
I did get the impression that it was a person. Mm-hmm. There was a quick cut scene where there was a person standing where Franco was, and I think it was meant to be the question that was being asked. That was what was triggering him to, like, sort of see it as if like it was just too on point, far more on point than he was comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, after the book signing scene, it cuts to the sort of true crime, true story follow-ups shows pictures of both the real Mike Finkel and Christian Longo, and kind of where they're at now, and what they're doing.
Oh, that was really, really, I don't know, sad. I don't know. I had feelings. I think one of the last bits of information it throws at you is, they still see each other on the first Sunday of every month.
Seems like a little weird.
Yeah.
It's very
a
odd.
lot weird. It's
very
a lot
odd.
weird.
Yeah, for me, I was saddened by it because I wanted Jonah Hill to regain his power, but he clearly didn't. He pretended to, sort of.
But I also feel like, I don't know, I'm curious because if the motivation is something different, because they said also in the end thing that less than a year after the events of this movie and book, Longo admitted to all of the murders, said he killed them all. Mm-hmm. So he really shouldn't have any power over Finkel. So there must be something else motivating them to stay in touch.
Well, I think just because the song is done doesn't mean that Franco was done playing his instrument. Not that he could really gain anything by it other than he needed control of something, and he had Jonah Hill.
Oh no, I understand why he would continue to talk, but why would Finkel continue to talk to him?
I think once again, I think the narcissism has a card to play in this, because Finkel saw so much of himself in Longo. We talked about it earlier. What does it take? What sets me apart from the serial killer that I just passed on the street? What makes me different from them? And I think Finkel saw something in Longo that he just couldn't let go of. Saw a lot of himself. They had quite a few parallels. And beyond that, they did develop a genuine kinship throughout the interview process, or at least it was genuine on Finkel's side. Yeah. So at that point, after the truth came out, there was nothing to lose. So, if anything, he just had an interesting person to talk to that he could relate to in a sort of twisted, dark way.
He needed to feel needed, too.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
Finkel and Einhorn and Finkel and Einhorn and Finkel. Sorry, I fucking had to. We just keep saying Finkel. Laces out,
Yeah.
So that's the narrative.
It is, yeah.
In a nutshell. I want to use this to segue into one of my quotes. I don't know if you guys want to jump into yours, but it's definitely more I want to talk about with it. But I want to use this as a springboard.
I hear you.
One of them.
Definitely.
One of the scenes in this movie, Jonah Hill's girlfriend ends up visiting James Franco in prison, and up to this point, you don't know with certainty that she is seeing through the bullshit, because this happens, a handful of scenes after that phone call that was made. And so during that scene, I'm sitting here as a viewer just hoping that she is not going to be played as well. And I don't know about you guys, but again, I felt like he was in the seat of power in that situation until she very cleverly kind of weaves in a story about a musician, I forget the name of the composer specifically, who ended up brutally murdering his own family. And so she said, I want to play something for you. She pulls out her phone and she presses play, and it's this kind of haunting, beautiful melody that's playing in the background. And she then says, this music is almost beautiful enough to make me forget that it was written by a man who broke his baby's skull on a piece of furniture, but not quite. And in that moment, for me, it was so powerful, because I got shivers. It was like everything that I was concerned about was for naught. Like she saw right through everything, and I loved that scene.
Yeah, I mean, she's basically saying, you are an incredibly skilled manipulator. You've got an incredible skill set, but it's not good enough to work on me. And that's baller, dude. That's
yeah.
What a great way to tell somebody, brutal. I'm not falling for your bullshit. I'm not saying you're not a master bullshitter, but you haven't reeled in this fish.
Yeah, it was amazing. I really, that was one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Yeah, I almost actually also said one of my quotes when we were going over some of the narrative, because or not when we were going to the narrative, but when we were talking about what sets us apart, what makes us not serial killers. The judge in this had an amazing quote when he was sort of I don't know what you call it when a judge gives their final sort of little clip or phrase after
Like a
verdict.
closing statement?
Yeah, after verdicts are passed down, the judge usually says some shit, and it's usually pretty personal and directed towards the defendant.
They give their opinions when
Kinda, yeah,
when it's
yeah, yeah.
finally appropriate to do so.
And he says to him, in his very, in a much longer quote embedded in that, he says, "Quite frankly, you're a mystery to me, and God willing, you will remain so." And that is just like fucking... That's exactly what we were talking about. Like, I was debating on whether or not we should bring that quote up in the middle when we were talking about that, but like, that's just it. Is like, as a person who doesn't murder their family, it's pretty fucking hard to understand the people who do. Mm-hmm. And...
It's best if you don't.
Yeah, honestly, like, if it's between, like, understanding, as far as humans are concerned, almost exclusively means empathy. And empathy is essential to every aspect of human interaction. But, like, there are some people that, like, you gotta be a special kind of person to want to empathize with them. And the people who murder their own family are
not on that list.
No, I would say they're squarely in that. That group. They're squarely in the group of, I don't need to understand you because I don't want to build any empathy for you. And while I don't know if I necessarily like agree with that objectively, I feel like emotionally and subjectively, I definitely feel like that. Like, I am not interested in gathering an understanding and an empathic connection to a serial killer.
No.
I think objectively it's important because I think if we want to shut ourselves out from understanding groups or people that on the surface we don't understand, it's a very like slippery slope that can lead to a lot of prejudice and hate.
It sets a dangerous precedent.
It does, exactly. And I laud the people who make it their job to understand these people and to try to help society as a result of understanding these people. I am glad that I am not one of them.
I second that. I second that motion.
Do we want to cover anything else on our overview before jumping in? I just have like, it's such a powerful and disturbing opening scene. The acting was awesome. Mm-hmm. The directing was kind of, was fine. The writing, I think they drew a lot from the book.
Yeah, there were a few cinematic moments that I appreciate. I think the opening scene, not in its brutality, but in the close-up of the teddy bear as it's falling down. I thought that was a fine piece of work there. I appreciated the way that was done.
Oh, the way they shot it was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, you really honestly didn't know what you were looking at until the teddy bear fell away from the camera a little bit. It was
even still, it was sort of a mystery. I didn't pick up that it was a suitcase originally until I saw the zipper starting to close, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah. Anything we didn't like in this movie?
Pacing is a frequent criticism that I have of a lot of movies. I didn't have it with this one. The score wasn't spectacular, but it didn't detract.
I felt like the connection between Jonah Hill and his girlfriend could have been developed a little bit more. I felt like they definitely tried to show, like, okay, their relationship was not strained, but they were definitely doing a long-distance thing because he worked in New York at the New York Times, and he was constantly jet-setting around the globe to do all of this stuff, and they clearly missed each other. That was described in a single phone call. And then when he lost his job, I think she was excited that he was sort of moving in with her, but he was broken and distraught. And as he developed into this story, the distance between them grew, and that's really cool. And like, I got all that, but I didn't feel like they were growing apart from each other because at no point did I really see them together other than that one phone call. That was the baseline that they were trying to set, and I felt like they needed a stronger baseline so we could see the different directions that they went in.
I think it was intentional. I think that the people who were making this movie were trying to draw parallels between James Franco and Jonah Hill throughout the movie and how narcissism can manifest in different people. And their relationship, Jonah Hill and his girlfriend, was so estranged. I would assume that was intentional. It was supposed to show that he was also absorbed in his work and he didn't have room for passion. You didn't know if they were boyfriend-girlfriend, until a few scenes. I was like, is this his sister? And it wasn't until she kisses him. So, like, I took that to mean that his condition, Jonah Hill's condition, was one that left him detached from everyone else in a way that facilitated his own passions. That he was very absorbed in what he was doing, and she was a passenger to his story.
I think that's a super interesting, like, perspective on it, but I feel like if that's the case, then I would have liked the other thing, like to be a little bit more heavy-handed about like, this is what we're trying to do, like if your point is to land which I think it's a very well constructed point. I feel like we're too much on one side or the other.
That's true.
Or should I say, like, one point is on one side, one point is on the other. We're too much in the middle. Like, either make it more heavy-handed that the narcissism is driving this, like, cold detachment, or set the foundation for, like, a warm, loving relationship and then show the progression of the detachment.
Well, and Longo actually has a line that sort of alludes to that during the manipulative phone call to Jill, Jonah Hill's girlfriend. He had mentioned that, he had made friends with Finkel and that he feels like Mike could do that with everybody. And she says, "No, I think you're special." And what that suggests to us is that you're right, that Mike is a very cold and detached person, typically, seemingly lacking in a certain level of empathy and more an intellectual curiosity. He likes to pick people apart. He's an investigative journalist. So he doesn't form lasting relationships with a whole lot of people. He gets what he needs from them and moves on, which makes for a difficult romantic partner because you never know how long they're going to stick around. So the fact that she could feel him drifting away from her and towards this murderer of his family, I think the subtext there was that she was very uncomfortable that he was drifting in the wrong direction. And to build off of that, I think my only complaint with this movie is that we didn't really get to see as much of Jill's side as I would have liked. We see her in the background a lot, during the interview scenes. We hear the narrative being discussed between Finkel and Longo, and we see Jill at work in what seems to be some sort of university library, cataloging books and looking at old tomes and doing her job, but we don't really get a full picture. We just get glimpses of that.
Yeah, it's a little thin. Like, she's like looking at an illuminated manuscript where like the first letter, is all a picture and shit, and it's like it's the devil like consuming
souls
bodies and souls and shit, and you're just like, okay, well, clearly there's some strong symbolism there, but at the same time, like,
it's not a full picture.
You're kind of giving me half of what I need to really characterize this person, this character, like, to really get them square in my mind.
Do you think that, again, just continuing to play devil's advocate here, do you think that was intentional for a more dramatic scene where she turns the tables on him when she visits him in the cell?
I don't know. I feel like, honestly, it would have been better the other way. Like, if we had known her more, we were more invested or more convinced that she wasn't going to do that, and then she just fucking, like, blindsides us, I think it would have made for a little bit more powerful of a scene.
It's true.
But other than that, I mean, I did dig this movie overall.
Yeah.
And, maybe slight hair splitting on that account, but Felicity Jones did an amazing job in this movie, but I think the writing may have just been like a little lacking there. Do we want to move on to quotes?
Yeah.
We already dipped into a few of them. There's one that I really like that I feel like illustrates the interplay between the two main characters very well. It's when they're first... It's kind of in the middle of the montage, to be honest. They've like already sort of become friends, but they're not quite to the end. And Finkel brings up this writing exercise so Longo can practice his writing, and it's basically like word association. So you give a single word, and the person needs to write down the first thing that comes to their mind. And they do 3 of them, and on the third one, the term given out is liar. And like when they exposed, they both basically wrote down each other, which is like fucking pretty powerful to begin with. But they kind of laugh about it, and Finkel, Jonah Hill's character, is like, "What? I'm a liar?" He's like, "You stole my identity." And Franco's like, "Well, I was in Mexico. What was I supposed to do? I had to choose someone." And Hill was like, "I don't know, choose Dr. Seuss." And he responds, "No, I needed it to be somebody nobody knew."
Yeah.
And it was really funny in the moment, and I think this was one of those pieces of dialogue that the writers wanted you to reflect on later, because it was one of those things where in the moment it was just like a funny thing, like, oh haha, like I accidentally said something that maybe was not very nice or bruised your ego a little bit, but in retrospect, after knowing what this person actually did and how manipulative they actually are, I think it was anything but an accident. It was very calculating, and it was basically to...
He's grooming him.
Yeah, basically, a little bit, yeah. Like, in the same way that you like, use a cattle prod or a sheepdog to, like, get the animal to go in the direction that you want, sometimes you need, like, a nip. and he intentionally bruised his ego in order to fit him into the box that he was trying to get him in, and to flip that power dynamic and diminish him a little bit, and to take away that identity that he had built as a writer. Like, I mean, this guy was on the cover of fucking the New York Times 9 times. Like, people knew who the fuck he was.
Yeah.
But Longo was trying to wash that out of his head. And that was a pretty powerful scene in retrospect, and also just kind of like a funny, quirky scene in normal viewing. Jackson, you got a pretty good one from the prosecutioner.
The prosecutioner.
There's the prosecutioner.
Yeah, so in the scene where the prosecutioner is trying to get information out of Jonah Hill's character, you know, he's trying to make him give up the book and all of the facts in it so that they can make a case against Longo. And Jonah Hill's character, Finkel, is just not going to do it. He says, no, you know, for the first time in this movie, he has journalistic integrity, and says, no, I made a promise, and I'm not going to do it. And he says, look, I'm trying to make you feel guilty enough to talk to me. I'm putting the turd, so to speak, in your pocket. Which was a hilarious line that made me laugh. Probably the only time I laughed in this movie. But it had a very vivid symbolism there, because clearly this was Finkel's responsibility to put this man away. He had all of the information and all the cards. But we find out later all those cards were Jokers and Wilds, because he didn't have the facts. He had suggestions of the facts. So he says, I'm putting the turd, so to speak, in your pocket, meaning I'm giving you this burden so that I don't have to shoulder it, because you're the one with the information. You're the one that can put this guy away.
Passing the buck.
The buck.
I'm going to be fucking putting turds in so many people's pockets.
Right?
So one of my other quotes comes immediately after that, almost. Basically after Jonah Hill says, no, I'm not going to help you. And the cop, like, walking away says, why don't you give me a call if you're having trouble sleeping? Like, you're not going to be able to live with the decision that you've just made. So when it's eating you alive, you give me a fucking call. Like, what a badass way to walk away.
Mic drop, if I've ever heard one.
My last quote, I was actually debating on whether or not I wanted to work this into the discussion earlier. My last quote is actually a quote by Jackson. And so we try to keep it kind of quiet while we're watching the movies so we don't miss anything. But sometimes you just can't help it because the movie gets to you and speaks to you. And I just hear very quietly from, like, during the scene where Longo is on the call with Jill and it's getting really creepy and it's dark and she's like closing the door and all this shit, I hear Jackson from the corner breathe, God, I'm so creeped out right now.
Yeah.
And that just fucking nailed it. Like, it was a very creepy scene. It was giving you the heebie-jeebies. I think earlier you described it as I just wanted to call my wife.
Yeah. I'm just she's alone in the apartment right now, and I'm here, and I'm going to give her a quick text just to make sure she's awake.
All of those serial killers that you're in contact with from the state penitentiary, make sure they do not have your home number.
Yeah, they have my cell.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's smart. That's smart.
Yeah,
They're calling me from their cell.
Whip whip. Are we gonna rate this thing?
I think we're ready.
Okay. I feel like I don't want to put rules on it, but I also maybe we should be tactful about the rating system that we use on this, so we don't get hate mail.
Okay. So
I might write in hate mail if we.
Oh man. All right.
This is a hard movie to rate.
Can we jump in?
Take it.
All right. This movie is good plus. Good, not great. I think it's definitely worth watching. I think it's for a niche audience. I'm going to give this movie a 6.6 illuminated manuscripts.
I like that. I went a little bit higher. Again, I agree. It's not for everybody. I was very intrigued by Franco's performance. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud. Anyway, I'm gonna go.
It's okay. We've already checked you in with a mental health professional.
Yeah, they're outside. They're waiting outside.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep them waiting. I'm gonna give this a 7.8 suitcases.
Oof, that was right in the line there. That was yep. There was an extra element that I was trying to avoid.
Yep.
But you skirted it.
So I was a little less generous just because while I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, it made me very physically uncomfortable. Killing of family members is on a certain list of things that I just don't handle well. So
yeah, that's a reasonable list thing to be on that list.
Diplomatic as I can put it.
I like hearing that from you.
Yeah. So I went with a solid 6.5 Schmulitzers.
Oh man, that's okay. That is both the most creative and tactful rating that I think we've ever had on the show.
It's kind of a deep cut too.
You're gonna have to explain it.
So after Finkel writes his story on the child in Africa, the ones being beaten, he writes this award-winning piece. He makes the cover of the New York Times Magazine. He's on the phone with Jill, and he's telling, hey, I just got back, and this is a great story. I think I did really well. Did you read it? And she's like, did I read it? Of course, I'm going to frame it. And so he's walking into the office. He says, hey, yeah, I'm actually on my way to the office now. Mark and Karen want to talk to me. And, she says, what do you think they want? And he says, well, I don't know what they want, but I think it rhymes with Schmulitzer, obviously being the Pulitzer Prize, which I don't know how I held on to that, but it was just really entertaining to me that I was able to pull that out.
Yeah, no, well done.
How the hell did you remember what his bosses' names were?
I don't know.
Says the person who's named the same name as one of the bosses.
It's true. It's true. I have this innate ability to remember innocuous things and forget very important information.
Wow.
Great at trivia, terrible at my job.
I'm going to get that tattooed along with no regrets. All right, are we ready to wrap this like a Christmas present?
I think so. Just don't put it in a suitcase.
No. All right, well, that is all for the All Crep review. Thank you for listening. If you have any ideas for movie reviews, email us at 3 meninaBasement@gmail.com. Also, Goo Bag going on tour fall 2020. Bag of Goo, sorry.
Yeah.
Goo Bag is our first album.
And Goo Envelope.
Goo Envelope, which is our opening act.
Yes.
They are a smaller version of us. It's pretty delightful.
Similar to Goo Man Group.
Yeah, they're big in the CD underground of Vegas.
It's a wet percussion band. It's very entertaining and visceral.
It's actually the Blue Man Group is a wet percussion band. The Goo Man Group is a moist percussion band.
That's a good distinction. Yeah.
Yes.
God damn.
One more time. That's 3 menandabasement@gmail.com. You can also find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. And until then, I am Colin McLeod.
Mark up.
Action Jackson.
All right. We'll see you in cyberspace.